Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. Scott Linden here, your host. Glad you could join me on our weekly sometimes even more frequently than weekly adventure into the uplands, following great dogs, sharing time with good friends, and of course, appreciating all the great, beautiful, incredible, stunning, awe-inspiring places we go. Hey, what a great topic. I think we'll talk about that a lot today. Jim Matthews will be rejoining me on our annual discussion, preseason discussion about finding great places to hunt. Jim is a writer, an editor, a publisher. He's got the Western Birds newsletter, does outdoor news service. This guy knows Western game birds better than anybody. In fact, just concluded a long series of seminars on finding Western game birds. So he's fresh on the topic, knows his stuff inside and out. If you're looking for places to go, Jim's the guy. We'll be spending some quality time with Jim Matthews on the Upland Nation podcast. Our Handle It segment this week, answering one of the questions from social media from Jon Schwedler. He's got a high drive young setter who needs to slow down and smell the birds. We'll take a swing at that one. And then just for fodder for your next spousal discussion night, how long are your big trips and why? That'll be on the docket just a moment from now here on the Upland Nation podcast, made possible by Sage and Breaker Gun Care products, Pointer Shotguns, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, Trulock Choke Tubes, MidwayUSA.com, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, and LandTrust.com. Well, here, a little bit cooler temperatures and a lot more miles for both of us. Flick is now running alongside. He's harnessed and safe and all of that, running alongside the electric motorcycle a couple days a week. Trying to be careful about that. The folks at Purina's research department have clued me in on frequency and how you up your mileage on that. So thank you, everybody over there. We're doing that, and then free running, of course, on the other days, and working on covey flushes, popcorn covey flushes. And boy, is that fun, because there's always a bonus in the middle of one of those, a bird that doesn't fly far enough, or, something else even more interesting. Anyway, you, though, you've got a lot going on, looking towards the season, of course, and who isn't, and what you're going to do. So I thought it'd be interesting to learn from you how the family dynamic works, especially when it comes to taking long trips. How do you get away with it? What do you get away with? So I asked the question, how long is your average hunting trip? And then I didn't get a lot of good information on the second half. Besides your spousal unit's encouragement, what determines its length? But if you're looking for an average, this is a pretty good one. These are your friends in the upland hunting world and what they're doing. Eric Kopang says 1 to 4 days, unless it's a local one. 4 days sounds about the average of all the answers. 1 day for Olson's gun dogs. Lance Larson has a couple bucket list hunts, 2 of those in Kansas. I hope one of them was with us. Lance, thanks a lot. Great picture, by the way. George Cummins, Iron Man. So's your dog, Samson. Well, he's an iron dog, I guess. 10 to 14 days. I remember some of those myself. And meeting you along the way. Robert Murphy, 6 to 8 hours for an upland hunt. So you're hunting from home, and interestingly, a lot of people are most of the time. 6 hours for Jay Knotner, not including the drive time. Yeah, my rule these days, and I'm able to, stay overnight a lot more than a lot of people, so I'm lucky on that regard. But my basic rule is I need to hunt for as many hours or more as it took to drive and go home. Otherwise, I kind of feel a little bit shortchanged. How about you? It just seems more logical. I like Jay's comments. It brings the wife along once in a while to watch and tend the dogs, and she encourages a stop at the local microbrewery after the hunt. Yeah, skull. Absolutely. Hunt from Home for Joe Rundell. Bruce Shilo. Bruce, help me with that one. 7 days at a time, or until we get tired of hunting. 6 to 8 weeks this fall. All right, if you're looking for fodder for your next conversation with your spouse, share Bruce's information. Tom Marks is looking for walk-in areas for him and his two Brittanies this fall. Let's see. John Simon, after driving 6 hours, minimum 3.5 days of hunting. I like that ratio a lot more. I'll share that with my lovely wife. Several times a week for a few hours, Lynn Glock. Yeah, I like that idea. If you live close enough to some of the good stuff, and that is the way to do it, absolutely. Well, there you go. If you're looking for more, just check out all the social media. Facebook pages are Wing Shooting USA and Scott Linden. And the other one is the Upland Nation. And then, of course, on Instagram and Twitter as well. And that part of the show is brought to you by PointerShotguns.com. Yes, I know it's a long wait, Georgia residents. 76 days to the quail opener. Yeah. Well, come on out west, and you can get started way earlier than that. November 18th is your target date in Georgia for that. The rest of us, count our blessings. PointerShotguns.com is where you find your new shotgun. Still got time to dial it in. Brighten up your opening day with a new semi-auto or an over and under or side-by-side. And by bright, I mean, yeah, take a look at some of the Cerakote colors they've got there. If this is the year you're upgrading your shotgun choice, go to PointerShotguns.com and shop around. And maybe this is your season to get outdoors without the crowds. If you're looking for one of those bucket list locations, you can't go wrong starting at landtrust.com. Yeah, for probably the price of a hotel room night, pardon me, you can get on private land all by yourself with your dog so that you can focus on what you want to do. Find birds, enjoy time with your dogs and a friend in incredible places. Create a free account on landtrust.com and shop around. landtrust.com. And outfit your next trip at midwayusa.com. I told you I was in their state-of-the-art distribution center where the right human touch is combined with the incredible technology of tomorrow. I can't describe it any other way, which allows them to fill every order and get it out the door if you make that order before 3 p.m. Yeah, it's on the truck and on the way if you order that day before 3 p.m. They've got a constantly growing assortment of dog and bird hunting gear. And of course, they carry just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors. MidwayUSA.com. Sign up for emails or text notifications, and you'll get 10% off your next order. Well, it's one of those annual traditions, and this is the right time of year. That way I can be a little bit selfish without sounding like I'm selfish. My guest today is Jim Matthews. Jim is, man, he's been around. We actually did meet once at a Ed Rice show a million years ago back in the day. Jim has the Outdoor News Service, the Western Birds newsletter. This guy's been helping hunters and anglers with practical information for way, way longer than most of us. Jim, great to have you on the show again. Thanks for being part of the Upland Nation podcast.
Oh, it's always fun to be with you, Scott. It's two old Southern California guys talking about bird hunting. It just doesn't get any better than that.
Absolutely. And like I said, I'm going to be a little selfish because my target for my big trip of the year is down in your bailiwick. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And of course, you, like me, you can't get away from it. But the Little League World Series had a big piece of your neighborhood in it for a while this year. And, if it wasn't for Little League, I'd be doing hard time in a federal facility. So I'm still a big supporter there.
Well, I got to run us down the first rabbit hole. I live right next to the Western Regional Little League World headquarters right here. And so we've watched the regionals for years and years. We can walk over to it from my house where I live in North San Bernardino. And I'll never forget years ago when I was a full-time newspaper guy, I covered, Western Regional Little League. And so I got to know all the managers and coaches and a lot of the kids, doing that. And the kids from Colorado, and I know you love to fish, had about, I would say, all but one or two of the kids on that team had never seen the ocean, let alone fished in the ocean.
Oh, wow.
So we set up a deal where we took the kids fishing on one of their days, half days off. We took them down to the coast and took them out on a half-day boat, and the fishing was pretty good, and the kids had a good time, but the sea was a little rocky, and we had a couple of kids puking over the side. And I'll never forget. The best line of the whole trip was there's two kids that really just hammered it. I mean, they were having so much fun and were just really, they were obviously fishermen. These two kids were at the back of the boat and catching bonita after bonita, and all of a sudden some of this vomit drifts by them, And one of the kids leans over and he says, "What's that?" And because the seagulls were diving and bombing on it, and one of the other kids says, "Oh," he says, "that's just Bobby chumming for gulls."
Oh my! Well,
yeah, I'll never forget that. That was just a hoot.
Yeah,
great way to start our segment, huh?
That it's funny though. Little League and blue water fishing seem to go together. Did a little bit of that myself when I was a player back in the day. Didn't do that last part though. Yeah. I've never gotten sick. The small on those overnight trips or multi-day overnight trips, the smell of diesel and dead fish would make me borderline. Yeah.
But I've never been sick on the boat, and I've got a son who's just a tremendous swimmer, and he gets seasick, but he can swim next to the boat all day.
Oh my! Well, that's a rare combination. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's a strange deal, But it's like me. I'm right-handed but left-eye dominant, So I shoot shotgun left-handed. So I'm, our whole family's just messed up one way or another. I've never figured out what the problem is.
Well, no wonder we get along so well. Jim, when I confirmed our get-together today, you sent back a reply and said you were out scouting today. You saw over 200 chukars at 5 guzzlers. I am embarrassed that I don't scout more than if I scout, it's because scout is in quotations, and I was doing something else and I just saw birds out of the corner of my eye. You do a lot of it. In fact, you're going out again later today. What do you do? How do you do this kind of thing preseason? What's your routine?
As you know, we just finished a series of seminars with a guy who, helps us both out a lot, Legacy Sports, and Andy McCormick. And, we gave away during the seminar series, at the end of the series, we drew for 3-pointer shotguns. So it was a really cool deal. But one of the biggest things I talk about in these seminars is how to scout and, to find birds. So many guys in our sport today, whether they're new or old, are just don't know how to get started. I posted one of the photos I sent to you of chukar. I posted as part of a cluster of 3 photos on my social media, and the guy immediately emailed or put a post on my or a comment on my post wanting to say, hey, I don't want to ask for a specific spot, but could you give a guy a hint who lives out here in the West Mojave, that Barstow, Victorville, Apple Valley region? And he said, just could you give me a hint on where to go? And I thought, my gosh, this guy has no idea of the resources available to him and, the fundamentals of just getting out and putting around scouting. Because, and I probably take it for granted because I've done the newsletter since 1996.
Yeah.
And it's a site-specific newsletter. You and I have talked about it on the podcast before. Western Birds is kind of for guys that don't know about it, it's a rare find, especially guys that don't have a lot of time to get out. I'm their eyes and ears out in this part of Southern California, So I text this guy back and I said, hey, look, the easiest thing for you to do is to subscribe to Western Birds. I said, the second easiest thing for you to do, and it's a little cheaper, is to get onX Maps. And the third thing to do, and I didn't say this in the note, but I said, if you really want to do it on the cheap, is go to the U.S. Geological Survey site and download all the maps for your area and look for natural water sources, springs. And I said, while you're looking at those things, our desert, in the Arizona desert, New Mexico, all of the desert regions have a lot of old historic stock tanks and windmills and mine shafts. And I tell guys, I said, the number one, the most important thing for Southern California Southwest bird hunters is water. Especially our Mojave Desert is the most arid desert in the country.
Mm-hmm,
and there's a lot of controversy whether or not birds can survive without open water in this part of the desert. And I don't think Gambel's quail can. There are places where if there's succulents and cactus that they can peck and get moisture, they probably can. But if they have open water, they're 100 times better off. And so I tell guys, you need to scout water, especially in our Mojave Desert. And I said, so scouting's your basic thing is you're looking for water sources. And, those old U.S. topo maps are great because, they show all those old mine shafts and they show, historic wells and stock tanks and windmills. And now, a lot of them are not operational anymore. But, these are things that a guy can go look at. And every once in a while, you come across to find. I mean, in the seminar, I talk about a spot out in the East Mojave, almost to the Nevada state line, where it's called Mineral Spring. Heck, I'll just tell people because it's way out in the middle of nowhere.
If you find it, you deserve it.
And it shows on all the maps. But Mineral Spring dried up years ago. But the cool thing about Mineral Spring is it dried up when old miners dug straight into the mountainside and hit that vein of water. And every one of those mine shafts to the east of where Mineral Spring shows on your maps has water right out to the mouth of the mine shaft.
I'll be darned.
And the quail and the doves and the chukar and the burros and the desert mule deer all use those spots.
Sure. Makes all the sense in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, you look for water, and that's the first thing. And those resources that are available today, compared to when you and I were kids, and it was all boots on the ground, and old topographic maps. I mean, we didn't know where the guzzler locations were, and our fishing game in California, didn't tell anybody well they were. They didn't publish a book like Nevada does. They weren't on onX Maps, on your phone. We had to, get out and stomp around. And I joke with people. I say, I have walked around on birdless mountainsides probably more than any person in Southern California.
Yeah.
I've covered a lot of places where there's no birds.
Well, a lot of times, whether it's scouting or hunting a new spot for the first time, the best thing that can happen is you cross that place off your list. And thank you for doing a lot of that for us. Let's just place ourselves for a while there. I know we're going to talk a lot about what I'll loosely call the desert Southwest. And in general, I think we can broaden that topic a little bit to desert birds, and it will be relevant to anybody who's coming looking for gambels, looking for valley quail, looking for chukars. Any other species in that list that you encounter on a frequent basis out there?
Well, chukar. Valley quail are the foothill birds. The Gambel's quail are the true desert birds, and then the chukar live kind of from the bottom to the top. I joke with guys. I say, if you started hunting chukar out of Lone Pine in the Sierra Nevada, they would run you to the top of Mount Whitney and then flush across the Owens Valley to the White Mountains. And they would flush just out of range. So you would climb Mount Whitney, never get a shot at a bird, and probably die of a coronary in the process.
Yep.
But so the chukar are, they're an introduced game bird. They were introduced about the same time as they were throughout the West here in California. And they have thrived. And this, Scott, I think the last time we talked, we had just a terrible bird year coming in the last 2 or 3. Well, last year was pretty good. We had a good hatch last year, at least a decent hatch. And this year we have had a tremendous hatch. And like you mentioned at the start, I went and visited 5 guzzlers out in our West Mojave region between Barstow and Lucerne Valley, and we counted over 200 chukar at 5 guzzlers. I mean, we're covering ground because I wanted to see if it was like that everywhere. Yeah. And I have to tell you, every place we went to that had water had chukar on it. We looked at a couple of spots, two historic springs that were dry this year. I've never seen one of them dry before, and there were no birds. Yeah. So that just kind of points out that they are on the water.
So let's, just for my edification, number one, I agree.
And it was only 101 yesterday, so it was a really pleasant day out in our country.
Oh, I'm glad we're out of that.
Yeah. I always joke with people. I always say, I'm not very smart. My brother-in-law and I go out and scout these spots, and we'll walk for 4.5, 5 miles, looking at birds and places, and it's only 105 out,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was young and dumb once too. You just never got over it.
So that's a true story there.
I remember an old timer telling me once years ago, we were birdless in the middle of a chukar hunt, and we're talking across the hood of the truck, and he says, "We'll go to this creek at this time, and the chukars will be lined up walking down into the creek." And that day he was absolutely right. They came at the time, at the place. Of course, I've never seen it since. But do you think they have a schedule? Do you think it's particularly chukars? But I'll talk quail because of my own backyard experience. But do you think they come? Do they get to water twice a day? Is it morning and afternoon? Tell me more about anything in terms of their schedule.
I think they do have a schedule, but I think it changes a lot as the season progresses and the young birds get older. I think when the chicks, whether it's chukar or quail, are really young, when they're just learning to fly and sticking and learning the routine, learning where they roost, where they feed, where they go and escape cover when they get chased by Cooper's hawks, and where they water. And they're talking a lot this time of year. So they're easy to find because the birds are talking. They're chucking or, doing the quail call, the Chicago call all the time this time of year. So they do. In other words, I always think that I tell people, they come down off the roost at the most pleasant time of the day for the seasons, the earliest of the most, if it's freezing out. Yeah. Chukar and quail probably don't come out of the rocks or off the juniper trees they're sitting in for the night until the sun hits the tree for 15 minutes. If it's 105, like here, they're moving it, not much after first light. They're already starting to move toward where they're feeding and going to get a drink. They're probably going to get a drink, the first drink, earlier in the day. And some of them may only drink once a day, but if it's hot, and especially young birds, I think chicks, when it's hot, a lower surface to volume ratio, I think they need to drink more. So I would bet that, quail and chukar chicks go to water twice a day when it's as hot as it's been here. I
would agree, and we're seeing it, especially on the hot days. We have our backyard has the only water going south for 30 miles. So if there's quail in the area, they're going to stop by and say hello. And it is morning and afternoon.
With the chukar. Yeah, I'll give you an example with the chukar. I mean, yesterday we started not really early. We started at 8 o'clock or something, and I think we were on our first guzzler at about 8:15. And we intercepted birds coming to the guzzler.
Yeah,
they weren't. All of them weren't there yet. There were a few, but there were 2 coveys coming in from different directions. So they're coming into water mid-morning. Every other guzzler we went to, and this was until almost noon, had birds on it. Now, at noon, the last guzzler we checked, the birds were within 50 yards of it, but they tucked in and they were all sitting together in the shade. There was only one bird on the guzzler when we came up, and that was a very young bird that decided he didn't get enough to drink, when they came in 35 or 40 minutes or an hour ago. But they were still fairly close to the water source. There's food everywhere out there this year. We've had just amazing there's food everywhere. So they were just tucked up on the edge of a wash in the shade, kind of on the, that north side of the wash.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about food down in the desert in particular. The standard, the cliche, especially with chukars, is find cheatgrass or give up. That's all they eat. But, many, many people, and I've seen it most recently in the last few years, will tell you they're eating a lot of other things as well. What are they eating in the desert out there?
Now, there's cheatgrass everywhere in our desert.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally are walking through or climbing through cheatgrass all day long.
Yeah.
And so the birds can get cheatgrass seed virtually everywhere. But we've noticed the last few years, I've got a buddy we hunt with now who's a darn good botanist. He's a private consultant now for many of the environmental organizations, and he can identify the seeds out of the crop.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we were cleaning chukar last year, and Andy's there, and Andy's looking at the seeds, and he says, "Oh, this is Amsinkia." He said, "They love Amsinkia." And, most guys know that as fiddleneck.
Okay, all right.
And we have fiddleneck everywhere, but it requires a little bit of moisture. So it's mostly in the canyon bottoms and draws. So the chukar come down into that country to eat this favorite seed. And there's a bunch of things that they eat. I've seen them eat, turkey mullen. They'll eat anything that's got I think they'll eat any seed out there, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm beginning to agree with all of that, and that's not even counting the bugs. Yes, grasshopper season, of course, but the rest of the year as well. If there's a bug that's just wandering past, they're not going to pass it up, are they?
Oh no. In fact, I really think that for us to have good hatchets, obviously we need those late winter, early spring rains to get the green up, and that green up fires up the hen's hormone system.
Uh-huh.
So she lays bigger broods. For those more chicks to survive, they have to have a pretty high protein diet early on to get that growth going. And that's bugs. And thankfully, the same wet soils that grow the vegetation that fires up the hen's hormone system grows bugs. And they are. I mean, if you've ever watched a covey of young chukar, half grown, chasing grasshoppers across the hillside, you've missed a great deal.
Oh, I bet.
And that's one of the beauties of scouting before the season, too, is you get to see things, with birds not disturbed that you don't. I mean, that's how I learned how to call quail, is early season stuff. Everybody, carries a quail call. I mean, and I've got one sitting here on my desk, and this is just quite frankly, this is a call we make with kids. It's a clothespin, black electrical tape, and a rubber band. And that's the young bird call, man. He's panicked. He's separated from the group a little bit, and he comes in. But you learn that just sitting and watching the birds, and they have a huge vocabulary. But the two basic calls that they do, that we all hear, both Gambels and Valleys, is they do that basic rally call. What I just blew.
Yeah.
Usually it's a slower tempo, and it's a locator call, and it's a distance locator. The other call that they use all the time that most of us only hear when they're about ready to flush is that.
Yeah.
That chit-chit call. And that's what I call their close contact call. If you ever have sat at a water source or have them in your backyard, you know that they make that noise constantly. They're talking that. They're happy. It's their happy noise.
When I'm writing about quail, I describe that as muttering to each other. And
very good. I like that.
But because they're always doing it. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if the young birds don't hear, especially this time of year when they're still learning the routine.
Yeah.
If they don't hear that, they do a rally call, a nervous rally call, because they want to know where the rest of the group is. They want to stay with the covey this time of year. And they call less and less as the season progresses, because the young birds know the routine. And they also learn real fast that by calling, they give their location away. Exactly.
So you're absolutely right. And I've seen that in real life. But going back to something you touched on a minute ago, and that is, we don't spend a lot of time watching and listening, in this case, to wild birds, except when we've got a dog on the ground and we've got a shotgun in our hands, when we can learn so much. And, to conclude our discussion on scouting, I think it's like anything else. We pay attention to our dog, we become a better dog handler. We pay attention to the birds, we become a better bird hunter. But that requires us to get out and do it. And there are ways to start. And if I can just summarize, particularly desert-oriented birds, if we want to go looking for them, in the off season, we probably ought to start with water source of one sort. I'm astounded. I'd never thought about mine shafts as a water source until you told me that story, Jim.
Yeah, and not, I'll be honest with you, not a lot of them have water.
Yeah.
But boy, we always, if they're vertical, we walk up to them and drop rocks in. If they're horizontal, we throw rocks in. And, you know, the thing that gives them away, if it's a mine shaft that has birds and there's water, you'll see tracks all around it, powdery dirt at the mouth of those things.
Yeah.
And there's almost always powdery dirt around the mouths of them. If there's tracks, you can just about bet that they're at least seasonal water sources.
Yeah. Let's go back to your seminar series, because I only wish I could have been there, and I'm lucky enough to be able to ask the same questions that you probably were asked a lot at them. And let's touch on a couple of those. What are the most common questions you get from people who go to your seminars?
Well, they all want to know where to go.
Yeah.
We have so little resources available to them today that they all want to go. I took a Southern California road map. So it's basically everything from, Fresno south to the Colorado River, Yuma, all the way. And what I did is I took, an orange marker, and I marked all the best areas, just because I talk about, our 5 best bird areas in the southern part of the state, And so I talk about the Carrizo region, which is west of Bakersfield.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then I talk about what I call the Greater Red Mountain region, which is all of that country from the little town of Red Mountain on Highway 395 and the Rands and the El Pasos across Highway 14, which parallels 395, and they come together right at Inyo Kern. I talk about the Scoties and that greater area. And then I also, since we're up there, I talk about, the Eastern Sierra Nevada and the Owens Valley is part of that big group. And then, and then I talk about the West Mojave, that country that I've been scouting the last couple of days, just over Cajon Pass and accessible to, 15 million people in Southern California. And that's probably Chukar Central South, if you will. If Red Mountain is Chukar Central North, the West Mojave is Chukar Central South. And then I talk about, the entire Eastern Mojave, which is, it's as big as 3 or 4 Eastern Seaboard states. And I always joke with guys, I say, we have about 120,000 upland bird stamp buying hunters left in California. And we could fit them all out there and give them all their own good bird canyons and never see another guy all weekend. There are easily 150,000 places to hunt out there. It's just big, big, big country, so they want to know places. And I try to focus on the places. And, I talk a lot about the lower Colorado River Desert, one of my favorite places. It's dry. The thunderstorm activity that Arizona gets almost never gets across the Colorado River onto the California side.
Sure.
So it has big boom to bust shears. But when it's a good year down there, that's some of my favorite places, country to hunt.
Why do you like that so much, that area?
I don't know. I'm a desert rat at heart, and that I think it might be because it also has desert mule deer.
Oh yeah.
And bighorn sheep, and so. We frequently, most of our deserts have, bighorn, but one of the places we hunt frequently for opener is a place that we go, I think, as much to see bighorn sheep as we do to kill quail. I mean, we almost always see them in this, this one canyon that we hunt out there, and so it's like, the binoculars are one of the things that goes around our neck, because we get a big kick out of seeing desert bighorn. I mean, it's just such an iconic animal. It's like jackrabbits in our desert. I love seeing jackrabbits.
Well, they're just a little less common where I go, say Southeast Oregon, Northwest Nevada, but I'll never forget one of the earliest encounters I had. I was hunting chukars on a really radical slope on private ground. I didn't know it was private at the time. And I later got permission, by the way, everybody, so we're okay there. But, you're walking along and you got that funny feeling. And so out there, it's either deer or a mountain lion. So you turn real quick, and just uphill and behind me is 4 ewes and 4 lambs. Not a single male grown up in the bunch. They're who knows where they were, but they were so stealthy. And as anybody who knows, if they've encountered bighorns before, they're almost like pet dogs. Sometimes the biologist can walk right up to them and put the ear tags in. You ever
Well, I've never seen them quite like that. Our populations are almost all hunted.
Oh, yeah.
Bigger populations.
Yeah.
And so they're pretty wary of people, but they're not. I mean, they'll stand and watch bird hunters from the ridge.
Yeah.
They don't disappear. They are very curious, but yeah, it's just one of those things. But I tell guys, I say, you're going to see lots of wildlife in this country where our birds are, because it's open habitat. That's why the birds are there.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about.
That's probably the number one thing that guys want to know in the seminars.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is I have a list of 4 things that I tell guys that will help them be better bird hunters. The number one thing that I harp on, and we've talked about it, is hunt near water. The second thing I tell them is they're like big game, especially if you're hunting chukar and mountain quail. Hunt the north sides of the mountains. If you're hunting the south-facing slopes down here, you're wasting your time. And I know that from 50 years of experience. You're wasting your time hunting the south slopes down here. They're on that shady, cooler, better vegetation, better cover side of the mountains or washes or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true for Valley and Gambel's quail too.
Sure.
I just don't think about it, And so I emphasize that. And I then the other 2 things are kind of, insider deals, and you have to learn where they go after dispersal. And I tell guys, I said, the best thing I hear from a guy when I meet him in the field is I hear him say they're all shot out. And what that means is he has no idea where they go after it rains or they get any hunting pressure.
Yeah.
And so, I teach them some of the basic things about, hunt up canyon and the side draws. Don't stay in the main washes where you've seen them earlier in the season or before the season. They move out of those places with pressure. And then the last thing I talk about is what we call the miracle of snow, which pushes all the mountain quail and chukar down into more huntable terrain, for the last part of the season. And, I always joke, I say, I bet most of you never hunt January. And January is my favorite month to hunt.
Oh, especially out there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cooler. There's better scenting conditions. We've had weather. You might have to even wear a jacket down here for crying out loud. And it's much better scenting conditions for the dogs if you're a dog hunter. Those are the 4 things I teach the guys. That's kind of, well, I'm just going to, when you put this up on your website, I'm just going to start linking everybody to it. So if they don't want to take my seminar, they can just go to your podcast here and listen to all the stuff.
Yeah. Hey, and the price is right.
That's right. That's right. They don't have to pay $60 to see me in person for 3 hours and say, oh my God, he's going to tell another one of his stories.
I thought if we had to see you in person, you were paying us the $60.
That's what my brother-in-law always says. I have a brother-in-law that says $60. They pay $60 to hear you speak. He says, I'll give you $60 to shut up.
We'll talk more about the good stuff, including some of the things we just touched on. I really want to talk about that number 3 item in your list there and going farther and higher, for example. That's Jim Matthews. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation podcast. A couple of messages, and then we'll be back with Jim, and then hold on after that, because I'm going to get some advice from everybody, and I'm going to give a little too, about slowing down a high-test English setter who just doesn't sniff as well as he could. It's all coming up after a couple messages. The first one from my friends at TrulockChokes.com, TRULOCK chokes.com. Precision made, tight tolerances, state-of-the-art CNC equipment, American-made steel. They produce these choke tubes in their factory in Wiggum, Georgia. Exact, careful, meticulous engineering, design, and manufacturing. I've said it before and I'll say it again. When I'm shooting sporting clays and some guy's pulling out his choke wrench every couple stations, it's because the tolerances on the threads on his choke tubes are not quite what they should be. Well, the guys at Trulock get a hold of every manufacturer's barrel and make sure that their engineering matches the barrel threads exactly. Learn more about what they've got for you. 2,000 choices. No matter what you're shooting at, they've got a choke tube for it at TrulockChokes.com. And I'm fueling my dog's performance with Pro Plan Sport dog food from Purina. Learn more about all their formulations at ProPlansport.com. When we were touring the facilities out in St. Louis, the thing that amazed me the most is how much research they put into everything they do. Some interesting new products coming out in various ways. Love what they're doing. They're here to solve our problems through nutrition, and it works. Whether it's the correct protein to fat ratio, the protein sources, or all the other things that are in there engineered to make your dog a better hunter. Learn more at ProPlansport.com. Speaking of learning more, let's get back to Jim Matthews, writer, editor, the guy behind the Western Birds newsletter and Outdoor News, the website. Jim, how do we learn more about you? Give us a kind of a URL or whatever else we should use to learn more.
Well, they can find out about the seminars, the newsletter. I don't do much news writing anymore. My career was as a newspaper writer. I spent 50 years as a newspaper reporter doing outdoor stuff. And newspapers have just disappeared, so we'll go a different thing. But I also make a line of really pretty custom quail calls. So guys can
beautiful,
look at those. And they can get all of that. They can get information about all of that on my website, which is it's a long one. It's a mouthful. It's Outdoor News Service. But don't forget the double S. It's Outdoor News with an S, Service with an S.com, OutdoorNewsService.com.
Got it. And we'll be providing a link for that in the show notes as well. So if you don't catch it.
Yeah, and, guys can also find me on social media. I have social media for the Birds newsletter. I mean, I have 4 Facebook pages and an Instagram page. And they can find me if they poke around. I think my Instagram is jim.matthews.33.
There you go.
A lot of my stuff is posted there. And, and I, like you, I do a lot of outdoor photography. And so I've constantly got photos going up. I've been doing a cool series of memes for dove opener. It's a countdown, 10 days, 9 days, 8 days. And I've been doing it since, 34 days ago or 40 days ago, I started doing a few a week. And now I'm doing them every day. And it's usually a dove photo or a dove hunting photo with it, just to get guys excited. I mean, we're going to have a great dove season like we always do, but here in Southern California. So, my whole deal is generate excitement for our sport. That's what I do. And to help hunters like we've been talking about before.
Help me a little more. We joke about it. Ben Warner, thank you, Sergeant Ben Warner. Airborne, yeah. He taught me many, many, many years ago that if the hunting sucks, walk another mile. And you alluded to the same thing. People say, oh, it's shot out. Well, it's not shot out. Those birds have just moved somewhere. So we're in our favorite spot for opening day and there's nothing there. So you suggest going further up canyon, take some of those side canyons. What are other ways we can look for what I'll call the B team habitat?
Well, 2 things I want to point out is that I'm Southern California, and if I go to my favorite spot opening day and there's no birds there, that means we've probably had 2 years of bad hatches. And there are not many birds. We really go from boom to bust. A lot of my hunting buddies, they'll go out and work the dogs on small, these little coveys and stuff, but they don't shoot many birds in the off season.
Yeah.
And so if they're not in your favorite spot on opening day, they're probably low bird numbers down here. Now, I know that's not true in a lot of places because, Northern California, Oregon, Southern Idaho, they have good hatches most years. And so if they're not their opening day, they've already had probably rainfall. And as your season progresses, they definitely will get rainfall and hunting pressure. Very few places don't get hunting pressure anymore. And the birds move when they get rainfall and hunting pressure. One, they're not going to stay by the water sources as much.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing they do, and I tell people, our desert birds are notorious. They love those big desert washes that run into the Colorado River or run across the West Mojave. And they live right in the bottoms of those big desert washes until they get chased out of them because that's where the roads go in most of the places. They're
yeah.
going right up the middle of those washes, and a lot of them down along the Colorado River are a half-mile wide in places.
Yeah.
Filled with palo verde and mesquite, and the quail, the Gambel's quail, run up and down those washes. And when you don't see them in those washes, it means they've been pressured out. And most of the time, they go up canyon into canyons that are on the north-facing side, generally, and into those little side draws. If I could describe a palo verde mesquite wash for you on the Colorado River, it would be a quarter-mile wide with a road up the middle of it, an old dirt road in the sand. And on the south side of that wash, on the north-facing slope, the hillside, there's a little wash running into the main wash about every 200 to 300 yards.
Sure, yeah.
And you have to find birds, and they're in one or more of those desert little side canyons. And I tell guys, I says, you have to exert boot leather. It's just one of those deals. You hunt up one of those little side draws, and then you cross. We have this. What you asked me why I love the Southwest, that Colorado River desert. There's what we call desert pavement or desert pan that is almost like an asphalt road or a cobblestone road. That's a better description. A very flat, smooth cobblestone road between each of those little side canyons. And so you hunt up one of those draws, walk across the desert pan, hunt down the next one. Yeah. You go walk up the main wash to the next one, hunt up it, cross the desert pan, and hunt down it. And then I tell guys, I said, where you find birds, if you find them in one of those side draws, man, you better mark that spot on your map if you're old school and carrying a paper map or your GPS unit or your Onyx map. Mark it, because they'll use that same wash year after year after year. There's a reason they're there. Good feed, good cover, easy access to water, whatever it is. There's a reason they're there.
Those are,
and it's not random.
No. You're right. It's got the right stuff at the right time, and they can be minuscule. I mean, they could be near the bottom of those draws could be 5 feet across, can't they?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, you've hunted this stuff, and it's true for valley quail too. I mean, it's the same, just different habitat. But those little side canyons, you get up into you thinking, oh man, there's nasty, thick, gosh darn, this is nasty. And then the birds start flushing, and they're in there because they've got good cover, and there's probably lots of feed under the manzanita where they're at now, or whatever it happens to be. And it's like, yeah, mark that spot, learn it. You've just found, guys always joke with me, oh, you're giving away the secret spots. It's like I always laugh. I say, no, the secret spots are where you have to find near this water source. And that's your secret spot. When you find where they go after they disperse, whether it's, like I said, whether it's caused by rain or hunting pressure, you found a little gold mine. It's your little piece of heaven that will be good year after year, when bird numbers are good. Down here, I always have to, add that caveat.
Yeah. And you've mentioned rain as a dispersal agent. And for the record, just so we all understand, is that because all of a sudden there's moisture elsewhere than the primary water source, so they can get water in another place?
Yeah, absolutely. I will do a chukar story right now. The guys who have heard my seminars before are going to say, I've heard this story.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a place that is a real popular hunting spot in Southern California here for chukar. It's called Opal Mountain. It's just north of the little town of Hinckley. And all of you have seen Erin Brockovich, the movie where she, the poisoned water. Yeah, anyway, yeah. Hinckley's there, and this Opal Mountain is just above it. And Opal Mountain is kind of the far eastern extension of a big black lava mountain range that goes due east and west. And from Opal Mountain to the west. And on the north side of Black Mountain is Black Canyon. Pretty common stuff. Well, Black Mountain is a great chukar mountain. And some years there are millions of birds there. But they have very limited water sources. There's a spring on the north or the south side of Opal Mountain. But there's also like 4 guzzlers and a well in Black Canyon, or in the foothills on the north side of Black Mountain adjacent to Black Canyon. And those water sources are where the birds stay. I mean, the Quail Forever chapter in our high desert here, it's called the High Desert chapter, a couple of guys did what they called a rolling comp count. down from Opal Mountain over the top and down into Black Canyon and out Black Canyon to the west and back to the main road. And the rolling comp count, and they only counted birds that ran across the road from left to right, whatever it was. Maybe it was right to left. They only counted those birds, and they counted them. And there were birds flying. They didn't count the birds that fly. They didn't count birds that went back the other way because they may have counted them going across the other way. Anyway, their rolling comp count, and it's about, I don't know, 7 or 8 miles through there. Their rolling comp count was 998 chukar.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and that's
a season's worth for me.
Yeah, that was a year like this one. That was a year like this one. Anyway, so that's a popular hunting area, as you can well imagine, with those kind of bird numbers and those water sources and all that. And it was like the first weekend in December we went out there, and it was a decent chukar year, and we drove the bottom of the canyon, and usually there's tracks everywhere, especially near the water sources, and we did not see a track. Well, we'd had a couple of good storms in November, and I'm thinking, I know the birds are here. I know they're here. And so from the north side, I just started climbing up Black Mountain, going up. And it's kind of a cool spot because you go up through lava rocks and there's kind of a bench. And then you go across hunt the bench, and then you go up through some more steep lava rocks, and there's another bench. And there's benches all the way to the top of the mountain. Well, this was back when I was younger, and I hunted, had a great old lab back then. And he trotted along with me and hunted his heart out, and he did not act birdie at all until we were like a bench from the top of the mountain.
Huh.
And then he just gets birdie, and he's moving a little quicker, and I'm picked up the pace to keep up with him. He's on birds, man. And we flushed a little covey of chukar, I don't know, 15 or 18 birds. And in one of my rare exhibitions where I actually hit something, I did something I rarely do. I doubled on chukar. And he went and ran to pick up one, and I went over to pick up the close one, and the bird is wet on its breast.
Huh.
It's damp. And I'm thinking, what? I know that bird was not down the bottom of the canyon, because I parked by a well that's a popular water source. And I know he wasn't there. So I'm looking at this bird. The lab brings up the other one, and it's wet too, but that could have been his slobber, labs. And I'm still standing there looking at these two birds, and the next thing I hear is that lab is getting a drink, and I walk around the corner of the lava, and there's a bathtub-sized puddle in the rocks, and he's laying in it up to his neck, happy as a lab can be, getting a drink. And so, yes, to answer your question after that long-winded story, is one of the reasons they disperse is there's water everywhere, especially in lava country. My gosh, yeah. Puddles will last for days and days on a lava rock when it's cool.
Exactly.
And they can go get a drink just about anywhere. The other thing that happens is that, and is just as important, is green up.
Yeah.
Our Southern California deserts start to look kind of springish by, December. If we've had a couple of good rings, all of a sudden there's this green across our deserts, and our foothills get lush. I mean, by the end of the season here, we're hunting, knee-high grass in a lot of places.
Wow. Green
grass that's sprouted up, and flowers will be starting to bloom in another couple of months, or in another month. We get our first blooms starting, into January, 1st of February, before the season's over. Plants are blooming.
Yeah.
So we hunt, in that. So the birds can move great distances. I've seen chukars seem to disappear off the planet. They'll move miles. They'll move across an entire valley and be on a ridge that has no water sources, but it has great feed and great cover. And, it's got puddles and rocks and, hardened roadways or whatever.
Yeah.
And they just disappear. And so when you find where they go, if you find spots where there are chukar in January, oh boy, you found probably a secret spot.
Well,
it's just amazing to me.
You mentioned green up, and again, that's another source of moisture, because certain times of year in certain places, we don't even bother hunting unless we see those little shoots coming up out of the desert floor, because the seeds are pretty much gone by then, and they're looking for something else. And you can open a crop, whether it's a quail or a chukar, and find nothing but basically green grass. So they're getting some moisture from that. And then speaking of moisture, you talk about snow as a I'll call it a limiting factor. You know, the birds, and the cliche is always, well, whether it's quail or chukar, they're going to come down below the snow line. And I think you're absolutely right 95% of the time, but I'll never.
Well, I think this, I was going to say, I think the snow has to be significant enough that it fills in where there's not a lot of bare soil. Mountain quail, valley quail, chukar, they'll all live in 3-4 inches of snow, so long as they can run over and, you know, scratch under a bush or on an open hillside where it's melted off or whatever and feed. But if we get, here we call it the big snow, you know, if we get the big snow, I think there are times when mountain quail have been forced to sit in a tree while it snowed for 3 days in the San Gabriels or the Scoties or the Sierra Nevada someplace. And then all of a sudden it breaks, and if all they can see is white, I just envision in my head they just launch out of the tree and, you know, start doing long glides until they don't see white anymore, and then they auger into the hillside. They'll probably fly 3 miles down mountain, you know.
I can't
and the
argue
Scoties
that
are a
at
perfect
all.
place where they do that, I think. And chukar are the same way. Once you get that big snow, it pushes them down. You know, I tell the same story. You know, that it's a. You remember, you're an old guy like me, so you remember Paul Harvey and the rest of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell the Miracle of Snow story about a buddy of mine that, you know, he's been watching the news. He sees it's a 3-day big storm. It's going to snow down to, you know, 1,000-foot elevation in the Sierra Nevada, and he's got his truck packed. And as soon as that big storm breaks, he calls in sick to work and drives up to the Scotty Mountains and drives up one of those dirt roads right to the snow line, and he hunts the snow line in and out of the canyon side hill. And he shoots chukar, and he shoots mountain quail, and he shoots valley quail because they live there year round. And he's just had a field day. And I tell that story, and you know, and I says, but then if you don't know Paul Harvey's part of the story, the rest of the story, you're going to go up there and drive up to the snow line and hunt in and out of the canyons along the snow line, and you're going to take my name in vain. You're going to call me all kinds of dirty words. And I say the rest of the story is that between when it snowed and when you got up there a week later after the big storm, we've had typical Southern California weather. It was 85. The snow line went from, you know, 1,000 or 1,500 feet up to 3,500 or 4,000 or 5,000 feet. And you drove up to the snow line and you hunted along the snow line, and you didn't see anything because the birds don't go back up. It's like a deer migration. They don't follow the snow up and down the mountain each time it snows. They stay down until it's time to go back up in the spring.
I'll be darned.
And the mountain quail and the chukar, I think, they'll go up a little bit, but mostly they are down now. They don't want to be up there and stuck in a snowstorm the rest of the year. And so they know once they get that big storm to move down slope. And it also pushes them down into the more huntable terrain. And that's why I always get so frustrated with the guys that won't hunt past, you know, Thanksgiving. Most guys in California do not hunt past Thanksgiving.
Well, it's the best hunting of the year, depending on where you're going and how much snow you have to put up with. But we learned that again the hard way. But I remember once, you know, believing everybody in that world saying, oh, yeah, don't hunt above the snow. But I watched, I was right at the snow line, and I watched a set of tracks going uphill in the snow. Tracked them, you know, just like Elmer Fudd, just looking at the ground, watching those tracks, get up towards the top, and they circle around a little clump of sagebrush, and I'm saying to my friend, hey, Dave, this is so weird. They don't live in the snow, but here's these tracks, and now they're going around this, there goes 4 birds out of this sagebrush. They were doing exactly what you described. They went up there and they got under that sage where they could scratch at the ground and get whatever was left that hadn't been covered with snow right there. And
and like you said, in most of the West, let's be honest, most of the places we like to hunt, whether it's northern Nevada or southern Idaho or eastern Oregon, they might eventually get a lot of snow, and the birds have to move to where they're on windswept slopes or whatever it is to be able to feed or move way down into the canyon bottoms. But for most of the year, they don't care about the snow. Like you said, they'll walk through it. They don't mind it at all. And that's true of all of our quail species.
Sure.
You know, it's not just, I mean, I don't think Gambels ever get much snow, but you know, occasionally there's a desert snow, but I've seen tracks right through that out in the East Mojave when it snowed out there, Mojave Preserve. So snow doesn't deter in itself. It's It's a lot of snow that covers up their food. That's what makes it. That's when they go.
I think that my takeaway on that is, like you alluded to, and that is there may be a foot of snow where you're standing, but if you look around, take a 360-degree picture, there are spots where there's no snow or light snow for whatever reason. And, you know, again, chukar hunting, a lot of people will say, well, when it's really cold or when there's a lot of snow, go to the south-facing slopes. And I think that may be the only time to bother with them. How do you feel about that when the weather has been crappy?
We never have it so cold here that the birds are on south-facing slopes.
Okay, all right.
But if it's 0 degrees in southern Idaho and you're out hunting, I think they're over in the sun.
Yeah.
And in a place where they're out of the wind. So if you've got a south-facing slope with a draw or a side hill down there that's completely out of the wind, that's where you're going to find the birds, because they're like us. They want to be comfortable when they're out there feeding and putting around.
That's, you know, more and more I look at it that way. I think, well, you know, if I have to put on another layer to go to that spot, I doubt I'm going to find anything up there. And I've had that experience as well. You talk about benches. I've got a slope in northern Nevada that has 3 levels of benches on it. And so the first one is the hardest to get to because it's straight uphill. But then you get a rest as you're walking on the bench part. And even those, number one, they're wonderful hunting sometimes. Number two, they got a pretty tall stand of sagebrush that breaks the wind. So if it's a windy day, those birds are hiding there. And if you're not comfortable, like you said, Jim, they're not comfortable. That's probably...
It's kind of like, as another fly fisherman, I know you'll appreciate this. We always joke for years that when you're fly fishing for trout, you fish at the most pleasant time of the day for the season.
Yeah.
If that's dawn or dusk, you fish dawn or dusk. If it's the middle of the day, you fish the middle of the day because that's when there's going to be the most bug activity. It's pretty simple.
Good point. And which reminds me.
And it's true for birds, too. You know, they want to be as comfortable, you know, doing their thing. When I do teach guys how to use a call, I always tell them, but don't do stupid stuff with your call. Don't. If it's 107 and you're out and it's 1 in the afternoon, 107, and you stop the call, normally if I'm first thing in the morning, I'll blow a call and listen for answers. Especially if I see some track, it tells me which way they're up the canyon or down the canyon, you know. But if it's 2 in the afternoon, it's 107, and you stop the truck and listen for a minute. Listen, it's hot. You're just sweating, and then you blow the call. It's like there's a covey of quail, 150 yards up the canyon that hear that call right next to the road where they just heard the truck, and it's in the sun down there, and they look at each other and they go, shh, don't answer that call. We do not want those genetics in our covey. That is a dumb bird.
There you go.
I said, so, don't be a dumb bird caller. But yeah, and it's true. I mean, and yeah, it's calling's important, but learning the weather and there's just so many little nuances of our sport that once you get it all down, it's not difficult. I joke. I pull out a 3x5 card sometimes as a prop, out of my pocket, and I said, okay, everything I've learned about quail, dove, and chukar hunting is on this card.
Yeah.
And I said, so it's either not rocket science or I'm just not a rocket scientist. And and then they hear my story about me spending, walking 4.5 miles in 105-degree heat, and they think maybe he's just a dummy, and maybe we shouldn't take any of his advice.
Which may also be true.
It's hard to dispute that logic. It's like, well, maybe I'm not very smart. It's just a lot of things.
I'll argue that part, but you do run into a lot of things that people should probably do less of. What are the dumbest things we do out in the field? Besides that calling example.
Oh, God, I'm going to pick on my brother-in-law right here. He's my best friend for 50 years. He introduced me to my wife, his sister. Randy has no sense of stealth. and I truly believe that some of the dumbest things we do, especially when we've gone through all of this stuff and we know where there are birds there and we're hunting birds. I think some of the worst things we do is, talk to our hunting partner loud and whistle at the dog and, make noise.
Yeah.
I think that the more stealthy you can be when you're hunting birds, one, you're going to get closer. And the dogs are quiet usually when they're working. They're not making a lot of noise. They're sleeking around through the bushes, and they'll lock up on point. And we yell to our hunting buddy, "They're right over here on point." Well, the birds are either going to take off running or hold so tight that you can't kick them out of the bushes. A mountain quail. There's places where we hunt mountain quail. If you don't surprise them,
yeah,
in thickets of manzanita, they will run from one side of the manzanita patch to the other. The dog can't get in. Yep. You can't get in there. And they'll just stay in that patch of brush, and you can hear that beautiful purring call they have, that. And you think, well, they're never going to get out of there, are they? And, they won't.
No, I still got scars on my left arm from laying into a blackberry patch like that, trying to get those stinkers out of there. If you could have brush hogged that patch, they would have stayed under the brush hog and not moved.
We joked for years about the perfect mountain quail dog would be like a miniature chihuahua, a little tiny dog or dachshund that can run on the quail trails under those mountain manzanita thickets and get those birds out of there. But we always thought, the bad thing about that is you kill one and it falls into that stuff. I'm sure that little dog will go retrieve it, but it will eat it. I don't think they'll just growl at you if you tried to reach in and get the bird from it, bite you a hand. They're just nasty little animals.
Well, plus they deserve it. I look at my dog like yesterday. I was working him on a bunch of pigeons, and at one point he just said, "Hey man, it's my time," and he just blew in, and luckily he didn't catch the bird, but I thought, well, after all that other stuff he'd done, I can understand why he was frustrated. Because I
had a lab. You'll love this story. You're talking about dogs thinking they deserve something, and it's a just reward. I had a lab. She was an old female yellow dog, and she was a great, great pheasant dog. And I made her hunt snipe with me a lot. And she was a pretty avid little snipe dog.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got into a good shoot of snipe, and I think we had 6 birds, too shy of a limit. We're driving home, and I just threw them in the back of the truck, in my vest with her, and I got back to the house, and she's kind of up against the seat, kind of cowering like she did something wrong, and I noticed she's got a couple of feathers in the corner of her mouth. And so I'm pulling out birds, and I didn't think anything of it because, they have feathers from doves and birds. They just stick on their face, And I'm counting, and I thought, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sure I had 6. And then I look at one of the birds, and its beak is gone. Well, I decided that she liked the chewy beaks, and she started chewing beaks off. And then it got to the head. She just ate 2 of the birds and was chewing on a third when we got home. But she would. That was the only bird she would eat. Other stuff
funny.
She'd carry around proud. But boy, snipe. If I left the snipe in the back of the truck with her, she'd eat them. Thought.
Yeah, I could see a beak as a chew toy. Yeah, I get it. It's not that far removed from like a deer hoof, which everybody uses, or a pronghorn horn, or a cow horn for that matter. It's the same material probably. Which now I'm disgusted. We spent so much time talking about beaks, but and we could spend a lot less discussing time in our next session because we will have another one. But if you wanted to leave us with one piece of gear that you carry in your vest in the field when you're hunting desert birds, beyond the obvious, maybe we should pick up one of them as well. What would it be?
Well, the obvious one to me is a call, and a lot of guys don't carry calls. Whether it's a quail call, that's probably the number one thing that guys need to learn how to use. And I tell people, even if you're a good bird guy and you get out of the truck in a canyon has birds, things get quiet, blow the call. You've just saved, if you get an answer up canyon or down canyon, you just saved you and your dog a lot of boot leather because the covey's down canyon today, not up canyon. So a call can save you a lot of effort. Plus, it's an essential scouting tool. I mean, it's the one thing I always have in my pocket.
Yeah.
The piece of equipment that I don't think a lot of guys carry is a pair of binoculars.
Yeah.
I know you carry binoculars most of the time, but I think binoculars, especially the little compact binoculars, are great. They're really good for using when you can see how high the chukar are above you and which rock outcropping they're sitting on that you cannot get to. So they're really valuable for looking up at those chukar and cursing them.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I'm a
you want to at least
believer.
see them. You don't want to just hear them. You don't want to just hear that stuff going on. You want to see them, so you know that they indeed were there. That it's not a hunting buddy messing with you with recording.
Yeah, I'm going to try that sometime this season. Just throw everybody else off. The other thing I use binocs for, and in our country, it's the food choices are a little bit more limited, so. We have another invasive weed called Medusa head rye, and it is miserable. The ranchers hate it, the farmers hate it, bird hunters hate it too because it has no nutritive value, but it is taking over vast swaths of the West. It's more invasive than cheatgrass, and we know how that is, but at least cheatgrass offers a little bit of food value to game birds. But we'll look at a slope, and from a distance, you can't tell whether it's cheatgrass or Medusa head. So you get a closer look with a binocular, and you certainly you can't see the seed heads, but you can see by the way it's growing. It grows in thick carpets. If you slip on these carpets of Medusa head, you'll slide down as if you're in a toboggan. So if you can tell that, it's not worth the climb. That's the way we use binoculars out here.
Yeah,
and
that's a great tip. A plant that, guys, I have a couple of buddies that have bought calls, and we've become friends in southern Idaho. And one of the things that they look for is Russian olive.
Oh, I love Russian olive, for quail especially.
Yeah, that's what they tell me. They say, wherever there's Russian olive, you will find quail. It's that simple.
Yeah, they'll roost in it at night. And those of you who are from elsewhere don't know that the valley quail in particular, they don't roost on the ground like the bob whites and the Gambels or the mountain quail for that matter. They roost in trees and bushes, and that's a good one for a whole bunch of reasons. The first is the thorns. Second is when I find Russian olive, there's usually a water source within 150 yards.
There you go.
So think about that as well. Good tips.
Another way to look for water is just glass for Russian olive, and you can do that from the road and see up canyons 2 or 3 miles if you got good binoculars.
And then you come around a corner and you go, that fruity, organic smell is always a Russian olive. It's got to smell like nothing else out there. So keep your nose open as well as your eyes. Keep your ears open. Jim will be back. That's Jim Matthews with Western Bird News, among other things. Like he said, learn more at outdoornewsservice.com. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation podcast. We got a little bit more to cover here in our Handle It segment coming up, putting the reins to a fast-moving dog that uses its eyes, not its nose. Maybe you have one of those. Jim, it's always fun. We will debrief again off mic very soon because I'm headed your way, so I'll give you the dates so you can go somewhere else if you prefer. But thanks so much for all the great, helpful information. Have a great season. We'll talk soon. Thanks for being on the Upland Nation podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Yeah, still more to come here after a word from HighVisSights.com. See what you've been missing. I shot 200 targets last weekend. I hit most of them. And if you watch the TV show, you know that's not often the case. I'm giving a lot of that credit to the interlocking light pipe system that HighVis Sights makes. No, I don't aim. I point. I use that move, mount, shoot method that seems to be working for me, and you'll read more about that very soon in a couple magazines. But the key to it is your subconscious needs to create a relationship between the muzzle and the target. I don't care what the target's made out of, feathers or clay. The only way to do that is to make that muzzle highly visible. I guess you could spray paint it orange, but why not put the interlocking light pipes on instead so you can change the color depending on the conditions? And there are various types depending on how visible you think it needs to be. Learn more about all of their patented interlocking light pipes at hivizsights.com. HIVIZ sights.com. And take care of your guns so that they become heirlooms just like the products at sageandbreaker.com. Crafted at the highest caliber with a lifetime warranty. Whether you're looking for a new shotgun case or gun care supplies, from spray on, clean, lubricate, and protect to firearms grease and the tools you need to keep your gun functioning at its peak. Don't miss out on future sales or the new products. You'll get first notification if you sign up for the mailing list at sageandbreaker.com. Well, getting some great questions and a lot of great answers on social media for some of the questions that I'm asking or asking you to help out with. And one of them was, hey, tell me some of your dog handling or hunting or dog training challenges, and I'll take a swing at them. You know, most of my advice is hard won and maybe only works for me and my dogs, but if nothing else is if you're desperate for help, maybe I got something that might help you. So Jon Schwedler, thanks for pitching in, asking this question. My 4-year-old high drive English setter is too sight focused and not using her nose. She runs by birds because she's so excited. So hyper, he says. She ran over a rattlesnake the other day so fast the snake didn't even have time to react. Wow. Just a white streak in the distance. That's a good thing, he says, and we all agree. How do I get her to slow down, Jon asks, and use her nose? Well, at 4 years old, she's probably past that kind of, raucous, crazy, balls-to-the-wall teenage stage. So I'm not going to say just give her time to mature a little bit more. I'm going to suggest a few things that have worked in the past for me and for other people. So if you offered up some advice, it's probably incorporated in this bunch of suggestions. The first thing I'd suggest, Jon, is you slow down yourself. If you're used to walking at 3 miles an hour, and that's a pretty good pace in the field, slow down to 2 miles an hour. And you can do that in a bunch of ways. Number one, just saunter instead of motor. Second is go further side to side. Describe that windshield wiper pattern like you hope your dog might do as well. If you're going horizontally, and if you're going left to right, right to left, instead of straight down the middle, your dog might hopefully mimic your pattern. That also will help more if at the edge of whatever you want your dog's range to be, that's where the birds are. Because a lot of times I think dogs have not been trained, if you will. They're not accustomed to, they're not used to finding birds closer in. If you can plant birds during your training that are closer in, the Spaniel guys do that a lot. But think about training to show your dog that there are birds in there. And if you can maneuver the dog around, my dog now, he's so convinced that when I point that way, there's going to be a bird there. He follows directions a little bit better. So start training for closer in birds. All those things together might just slow her down a little bit. Good luck to you, Jon Schwedler, and thank you all for pitching in on the answers and for your other questions. We'll have more of those on the Handle It segment coming up in future Upland Nation podcasts. And the Handle It segment this week brought to you by my friends who handle their own dogs when they're not teaching us how to shoot. at midvalleyclays.com. On top of shooting all the fun games, including Helis, if you haven't shot that, take a look at it. They offer a shooting school, and you would be taught by people who hunt as well. And just as importantly, if you're looking to upgrade your shotgun quiver, they stock a lot of subgauges. 20s, 28s, 410s, always in stock. Call Dave Fiedler. He's my gun guru. He knows guns and hunting. He can offer suggestions on how to start your search. And then when you're ready, he will be happy to order or ship anywhere, anytime. midvalleyclays.com. Well, thank you, Jim Matthews. You're a wealth of information if we are chasing desert birds of any sort anywhere. I know I learned a heck of a lot, and I'm going to transcribe all of that stuff and use it as I head your way. Thank you, Jon Schwedler, for your question this week. And please, everybody, keep asking those questions. And all of you who answered one of those questions on the social media, thank you so much. You're all pitching in to make us all better conservationists, hunters, and dog handlers. If you left a rating or a review, I'm very grateful to you. And I'm also thankful to our sponsors who make it all possible. Sage and Breaker, Purina Pro Plan Sport, Mid-Valley Clays, TrueLock Chokes, MidwayUSA.com, LandTrust.com, Pointer Shotguns, and High Viz Shooting Systems. Got some new material, once again, up at FineBirdHuntingSpots.com, so take a look over there as well. And unless I see you there, I'll see you here next week. Thanks for listening. I'm Scott Linden with the Upland Nation Podcast.